Welcome to our deep dive into the fascinating world of esoteric wisdom. We've got some really interesting sources to unpack today.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about all sorts of things like the Philosopher's Stone, ancient mystery schools, all that good stuff. You ready to jump in?
Oh, absolutely. I think people are going to be surprised to learn just how much these ideas have shaped our world, Art, philosophy, even science.
Yeah, I know, right? It's like this hidden history. Okay, so let's start with something I think a lot of people have probably heard of. The Philosopher's Stone. You know, that legendary thing from alchemy that can supposedly turn lead into gold and give you, like, eternal life. What's the real story there?
Well, the thing is, for alchemists, the Philosopher's Stone wasn't really about, getting rich or living forever, literally. It was more of a metaphor, like a powerful symbol for personal transformation.
Oh, okay, I see. So, like, instead of turning actual lead into gold, it's about, like, refining yourself.
Exactly. It's like taking those, those flaws we all have and working on them, turning them into something better, something more valuable. I like that. So how does that inner alchemy actually work?
Well, your sources actually talk about this really interesting alchemical process. It's called solve et coagula. Have you heard of that?
I don't think so.
So basically, it's like a two-part process. First, you break something down to its basic components, kind of like dissolving it. And then you take those components and rebuild them into something new and improved.
So you're like taking yourself apart and putting yourself back together in a better way.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And it's not just about like changing your personality or something. It's about going deeper, confronting those shadow parts of ourselves and transforming them. It can be pretty intense stuff.
Yeah, wow, I can imagine. And this idea of self-transformation, it's like a recurring theme, isn't it? It pops up in a lot of different esoteric traditions, like, for example, Hermeticism, which we were talking about before the show.
Oh, absolutely. Hermeticism is all about that journey of spiritual evolution, of understanding yourself and the universe on a deeper level.
Okay, so remind me again, how does Hermeticism approach this idea of personal transformation?
Well, one of the core principles of Hermeticism is this idea of as above, so below. Basically, it means that the microcosm, which is like the individual, reflects the macrocosm, which is like the universe as a whole.
Right, right, I remember that. But I'm still not sure I totally get it. Can you give me an example of what that would look like in someone's life?
Sure, think about the four elements: earth, air, fire, and water. These are super important in Hermeticism and in alchemy too, actually.
Oh yeah, I've heard of those. But they're not just like the physical elements, right?
No, they also represent different aspects of ourselves. So like earth is associated with the physical body, water with our emotions, air with our thoughts and intellect, and fire with our spirit or willpower.
So it's like a map for understanding the different parts of who we are.
Yeah, exactly. And by understanding how those elements work within us and how they're connected to the elements in the larger world, we can start to create more balance and harmony in our lives.
That makes sense. And it kind of reminds me of those ancient mystery schools, like they were tapping into this wisdom too, but through these really intense rituals, right? Initiations and stuff.
You got it. Your source actually mentions the Eleusinian mysteries, which were these secret rituals in ancient Greece. They involved a lot of symbolism, and one of the key themes was this idea of death and rebirth.
Whoa, death and rebirth. That sounds intense.
It was. Imagine like going through a symbolic death, letting go of your old self, and then emerging as this like new transformed being.
That's a powerful image. But why all the secrecy? Why couldn't they just teach this stuff openly?
Well, for one thing, these schools were all about like serious inner work and commitment to a community of seekers. The secrecy helped to create this really sacred space for that transformation to happen. It also, I think, helped to protect the teachings from being misused or misunderstood by people who weren't ready for them.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Now, you also sent me some stuff about the Rosicrucians, which I thought was really interesting. They were like this more modern esoteric group, right?
Yep. They came about in the 17th century, and they blended mystical Christianity with this idea of social reform. Like, they wanted to use their knowledge to make the world a better place.
Because they were all about action, not just sitting around meditating.
Exactly. One of your sources talks about how they believed in a universal brotherhood, like everyone working together for the common good. And they emphasized the importance of individual self-discovery as a way to contribute to that greater goal.
I like that. It's like we all have a part to play. Okay, now there's one more tradition I wanted to touch on, Kabbalah. It's the mystical side of Judaism, right? With all those intricate symbols and stuff.
That's right. And one of the most well-known Kabbalistic concepts is the tree of life, with its 10 sephiro, which are these like emanations of divine energy. It's a pretty complex system.
It definitely looks complicated. But I'm curious, what's the main takeaway from Kabbalah? What can we learn from it?
Well, one of your sources actually focuses on two specific sephiro that I think are really relevant to your personal growth journey.
Oh, okay. Which ones are those?
One is called cheesed, which represents loving kindness and compassion. It's about like extending that warmth and generosity to yourself and others.
That's something I'm definitely working on. What's the other one?
The other is gevura, which represents strength, discipline, and setting boundaries. It might seem like the opposite of cheesed, but actually they need to work together.
So it's about finding that balance, right?
Yeah.
Between being kind and also standing up for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Kabbalah is all about understanding those different forces within us and learning to integrate them in a healthy way. It's like, finding that sweet spot.
That's so insightful. And you know what? It kind of leads us perfectly into our next topic, cosmic harmony.
Oh, I love it. Are you ready to dive into that?
I am. Cosmic harmony. It sounds so, I don't know, kind of mystical, right? Like, is it saying that there's some kind of like secret order to everything in the universe?
You're not far off. The idea is that everything is connected and there's this underlying balance to it all, like a sort of blueprint or intelligence that's behind everything, from the way the planets move to, like the cycles of nature.
So it's not just chaos. There's like a bigger plan.
Right. And remember those Dionysiac architects we talked about, those secretive builders? Well, your sources actually connect them to the temple at Delphi.
Oh, yeah, Delphi. I was reading about that. It was like a major spiritual center in ancient Greece, right?
It was. And some people believe that its location, the way it was designed, even the materials they used, were all chosen super carefully to align with like cosmic energies.
Wait, so they were like building these structures to like tap into the power of the universe?
Basically, yeah. They were masters of sacred geometry, using mathematical principles to create these harmonious designs. Like one of the key principles they used was something called the golden ratio. You ever heard of that?
Vaguely. It's something about like a perfect proportion.
Right. It is. And you see it everywhere in nature, like in the spiral of a seashell, the arrangement of petals in a flower, even the proportions of the human body.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. So these architects were basically like incorporating those natural patterns into their buildings.
That's the idea. They believed that by aligning their structures with those like universal principles, they could create spaces that were not only beautiful, but also like resonated with this higher energy or harmony.
It's like they were trying to bring heaven down to earth. It's interesting because one of your sources talks about how even today, the placement of buildings can affect the flow of energy. Like they mentioned feng shui.
Oh yeah, feng shui. That's a great example of how these ancient ideas are still relevant today. People are realizing that the spaces we live in can actually have a big impact on our well-being.
Makes sense. So it's like we're rediscovering this ancient wisdom, right? That
Yeah.
connection between like the built environment and our inner state.
Exactly. And it shows how all these things are interconnected. Our inner world and the outer world, the physical and the spiritual. It's like a giant web.
So true. Okay, there's one last symbol I wanted to talk about. It pops up everywhere in these sources. The cross.
Ah, the cross. So powerful.
Yeah. Obviously, it has a huge significance in Christianity. But it seems like it goes way beyond that, too. Like one of the sources you sent talked about the Celtic cross and how it predates Christianity.
It does. That one's fascinating. A lot of people believe it represents like the intersection of the physical and spiritual worlds, or like the four directions, north, south, east, west.
So it's not just about like the crucifixion.
No,
Okay.
It's much older than that. And it has all these different layers of meaning. Like in a lot of traditions, the cross represents duality, like the meeting of opposites, heaven and earth, masculine and feminine, life and death.
It's like a symbol of balance then, of bringing those different forces together.
Yeah. And it can also symbolize transformation. Think about the shape of it. The vertical beam, it's like rising upwards, transcending the material world. And then the horizontal beam, it's like our connection to the earth, our grounding.
So it's kind of like that journey we've been talking about, right? This process of refining ourselves, connecting to something bigger, and ultimately finding that balance. It's pretty amazing how all these ideas, from the Philosopher's Stone to cosmic harmony and the symbolism of the cross, all seem to be like intertwined.
They do, don't they? And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways from all of this, the interconnectedness of everything, the idea that we're all part of this like grand tapestry of existence.
Wow. Okay, so as we're kind of wrapping up this deep dive into esoteric wisdom, What would you say is the most important thing for our listeners to remember? What can they do with all this information?
Well, I think one of the coolest things about exploring esoteric wisdom is that it kind of gives you a whole new perspective on things. It helps you to ask deeper questions, look for hidden meanings, and connect with something bigger than yourself.
Totally. It's like you're suddenly seeing the world in a whole new light. But it's not just about heady concepts, right? How can people actually use this stuff in their everyday lives?
Yeah, that's the important part. And your sources actually have some pretty practical suggestions. Like one of them talks about using the alchemical principle of separation to create healthy boundaries in relationships.
Separation. Remind me what that is again?
Basically, it's about discerning what serves you and what doesn't. Just like alchemists, separated the pure substances from the impure ones in their experiments.
Okay, so it's about figuring out what to let go of, what's not good for you.
Exactly. And creating those boundaries, protecting your energy.
I like that. It's like alchemy for your relationships.
Right. And another source he shared talks about using the Hermetic principle of as above, so below to understand patterns in your own life, like keeping a journal to track how things in your inner world, your thoughts, emotions, dreams might be connected to what's happening in your outer world.
So it's like becoming your own cosmic detective.
Yeah.
Looking for those clues and synchronicities.
Yeah, exactly. And remember that Kabbalah concept we talked about, tikkun olam, repairing the world.
Yeah, I remember that. It was about taking action to make the world a better place.
Right. But a lot of your sources emphasize that it all starts with personal transformation. Like by working on ourselves, by becoming more conscious and compassionate, we actually contribute to healing the world around us.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
It's like our inner work has an impact on the whole world.
It really does. And it's not about becoming perfect or anything. It's just about taking those small steps every day, trying to align yourself with those universal principles we've been talking about.
It's a journey, not a destination.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes it so exciting. There's always more to learn, more to discover, more to integrate into our lives.
Absolutely. And that's what's so cool about esoteric wisdom. It's not like some fixed dogma. It's a living tradition. It encourages you to be a lifelong learner, to keep asking those questions and exploring those hidden dimensions of yourself and the universe.
And who knows what amazing insights we might find along the way. This deep dive has been awesome, and I want to thank you for sharing your expertise with us. It's been a really fascinating journey.
It's been my pleasure. And remember, this is just the beginning. Keep exploring, keep digging deeper. You never know what you might find.
That's great advice. So to our listeners, I hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the world of esoteric wisdom. If this stuff has sparked your curiosity, keep that spark alive. Keep learning, keep exploring, and most importantly, keep asking those big questions. Because who knows? You might just uncover some hidden knowledge that changes your life. And that wraps up our deep dive for today. Until next time, happy exploring.
Please like, share and subscribe.